So today's episode is really about learning how to be free from the opinions of other people. And and this, goes for us as individuals as well as when we're in groups, because even the most put together of us, the most educated professional put together, however you want to define put together, um, we tend to we don't always think as independently as we think we do, and we can very easily get sort of caught up in what's called group think. So I'd like to just read the first part. I've got a little from the Tao, that's not the whole verse, just a few sentences, because it's just really kind of going to set the stage for what we're going to talk about here. So part of the 13th verse of the Tao Te Ching is: favor and disgrace seem alarming, high status greatly afflicts your person. Why are favor and disgrace alarming? Seeking favor is degrading, alarming when it's gotten, alarming when it's lost. So, basically, this touches on a little bit when we touched on codependency, though that's not the chat for today. It's about bringing that back in the living room. Instead of needing so much external approval and living at the beck and call, of what other people think of us, to really, really remind ourselves that, the only approval we really need is on the inside. And this can be tough, especially when there's that energy, of a bunch of people thinking a certain way and, commenting. It can be very, very difficult for us to separate from. So I'd like to kind of introduce you in a sense to the late Wayne Dyer. And if you haven't listened to his things on the internet, and he, oh my gosh, he's amazing. He's written a bunch of books. His very first one, I believe, is called The Erogenous Zone, and was enormously, I mean, it just was one of the best sellers, I think, ever, actually. And anyway, he talks about the Tao in his book, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. Change your thoughts, change your life. I love that because, with my cognitive psychology side, right? Change your thoughts, change your life, because this is the truth. Thoughts come first and feelings come second. We know that to be true. So changing our thinking without any exaggeration then changes how we feel, which then leads to how we act or behave, and therefore changes our lives, because this also alters our own little mini universe with how people treat us. So, Wayne starts out by saying the essential message of this 13th verse of the Tao Te Ching seems to be that it's crucial to remain independent of both the positive and negative opinions of other people, regardless of whether they love or despise us. If we make their assessments more important than our own, we'll be greatly afflicted. And this is something that's enormously important to be conscious of, because when we walk around on autopilot, people get under our radar easily. We don't even always um, get it, or we're not always, aware of it in that day, and necessarily, ever. They're just sort of, kind of slapping their approval stamp on it, and that we get this, ego feel good fix, and we don't ever, question. And of course, it's easier when it's a positive approval, but really, it's still having that. It's still kind of being like a little marionette, and the other person has the, is kind of controlling the strings. We're kind of just dancing around, whether it's positive or negative. The approval needs to be on the inside. That is the key. And so Wayne continues to explain. He says, seeking the favor of others isn't the way of the Tao. Pursuing status stops the natural flow of divine energy to your independent mind. You have a basic nature that is uniquely yours. Amen. Learn to trust that Tao nature and be free of other people's opinions. Allow yourself to be guided by your essential beingness, the natural you that nourishes your independent mind. By contrast, chasing after favored status or lofty titles to display self importance are examples of living from a mind that depends on external signals rather than the natural inner voice. Obviously, what he's talking about is the ego there. And we know that when approval seeking is involved, that's the ego talking, because the authentic self doesn't need anybody's approval, right? And the ego also doesn't want to die. The ego wants to stay alive. And so, seeking that approval, getting that approval, That's like catnip for the ego. Just feeds it and feeds. Of course, it's temporary because anything that involves the ego is temporary. Only the authentic self, kind of is a long lasting thing. So the ego is this temporary, like kind of like a dope fix. And then after that, we're just looking for the next one. And approval seeking is addicting, which is, kind of what our previous talk on codependency was. And so Wayne continues to kind of explained to us. He said that Tao doesn't force or interfere with things. It lets them work in their own way to produce results naturally. Whatever approval is supposed to come your way will do so in perfect alignment. I love that. We talk a lot about alignment in my Minecraft class, actually. So the idea there is to get the insides to match the outsides. And I really like how Wayne just said that. Whatever approval is supposed to come our way will do so in perfect alignment. And he says, whatever disfavor shows up is also a part of this perfect alignment. And, we don't always like that. I know myself included, right? We don't always like when disfavor shows up, but there's also reasons. We don't always get them in the moment. Um, sometimes it's keeping our ego in check. Maybe we're being too controlling of a situation, or we're being, whatever it is, where we're kind of a little bit lost, and we don't even know we're lost, because when that sort of like defines lost, right? You don't know you're lost. And then the universe just has a way of redirecting us back to, a more authentic place. And sometimes this involves a little smack on the butt, if you want to say, by the universe, right? So, so I like what he says, that whatever disfavor shows up is also a part of this perfect alignment, because that little tap on the butt, can redirect us, much like, say, it shouldn't be smacking toddlers, I don't want to say that, but much like we redirect, a toddler's behavior, right? It's getting us back in line with our own authentic self. And sometimes we need that. I know I do. I know I definitely do. Okay, so then he said, Lao Tzu Riley points out that pursuing favor is alarming, regardless of the outcome. If you gain approval, you'll become a slave to outside messages of praise. This is what we're talking about, because they're reinforcing, right? We get all kinds of pats on the back and kudos, and it's reinforcing. And it's not to say that's always bad, because that authentic praise is excellent. It's when we get into this habit, right? Or meaning, conditioned response, usually unconscious. We get into this habit where we're seeking it out. That's sort of what we're talking about, is, sort of becoming unhealthy, and something that's reinforcing and going to keep us on the track to get our self-esteem and self-worth from people and situations that are outside of us and our control. That's what we're talking about. So when we kind of slide into this habit of gaining approval, and we sort of becoming slaves to these external messages, that means someone else's opinion will therefore be directing our life. Think about that. That is exactly spot on true. And do we want someone or somebody's, else out there like directing our life from the outside in? I don't think so. And then Wayne talks about the gaining of disfavor, right? Because he's saying they're just, I don't want to say the yin and yang. He doesn't say that. Those are my words. But the two different kind of sides to it. We're still seeking, for approval or disapproval, whatever, from the outside. He says if you gain disfavor, you'll push even harder to change their minds, and you'll still be directed by forces outside of yourself. You know what? That is, not only is that well said, that also kind of threads together with the last episode when we were talking about the Tibetan word shenpa. When we, somebody criticizes us or our child or our partner, or just, some even light, they might not like the jeans you have on or whatever. And all of a sudden, okay, never mind if they make a crack and something salty about your political beliefs, something that's even deeper, right? Then this is even stronger. Then all of a sudden we feel that Pema Chodron referred to it as like a sticky feeling. And once we're aware of that, I think we can all relate to it. So so this disfavor comes, right? And all of a sudden we feel that surge. It's like a little bit like a hot lava, and then it's sticky, and we just gotta say something, gotta do something. And in that place, in that moment, it's like a sneeze we just can't hold in. And it's interesting how, to me, how when I read different books and different cultures and different religions, different spiritual leaders, different everything, and they're really saying the same thing. Because here, Wayne Dyer, based on the Tao, is talking about our need to push even harder to change somebody's mind when they kind of basically don't agree with us, and maybe we're in disfavor because we're not agreeing with them. And the whole idea of Shenpa, from Tibet, it's so related. And of course, in the States, we've had lots of political chaos and just dissonance. I can't think of a better word between, the conservatives and the liberals. And even if you're not from the States and the whole world is aware, and plus, whatever country you're in, you've obviously had this at some time or another. And, the conservatives are just 100% sure they're right and their opinion is the truth for all people, right? And the liberals, are sure that their opinion is right and the truth for all people. And when just myself being, you know, a when I'm just in a room with people talking about this side and that side, and you can just feel you can feel their, or should I feel it, you can notice their Shenpa. You can see the hot lava surge, even if they've got this, sort of the self control to kind of hold it together. You can just watch the clenched jaws it's just been very, very, very tense. And so I think this talk is also very timely for right now. And I will tell you all that I haven't had much to say politically. I've mostly just been, listening. I do with my husband, of course, and privately with the kids, but I don't really say much. And lately, it's almost been, I was very intrigued by just kind of being a fly in the wall, as they say, and listening to the conversations and just observing all the body language and, just all the energy going on. And it's interesting to see the paradox because the person who's talking and clinching and tense. They think they're right. They think they're in control, and so is the other person. They're talking at each other. It doesn't appear that anybody's hearing each other because again, they got the facts. Their opinion's the facts. It's the truth for all people, and they're all thinking this way. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And then I like how Wayne says both outcomes result in the dependent mind dominating, as opposed to the way of the Tao, which is where the independent mind flows freely. So here he goes. He says the 13th verse insists that ego and the need for importance are troublemakers that are energized by your in the world self. The way of the Tao is to be aware of your eternal nature and step out of yourself or body. No ego means no trouble. Big ego equals big trouble. Again, and lately, just kind of watching all these conversations and all the media and all this around, the political situation going on in the states, that there are a lot of egos being fed right now by the need to be right and when they think they're right, and of course when you're with a group of like-minded individuals, you're all feeding each other's egos, right? Because everybody's doing the group think thing and we're all in the same, we're all thinking the same, and approval. And the need to be right is an ego thing. Remember, the ego doesn't want to die. Then being right is like catnip for the ego. And I think the misunderstanding is that you know letting go of the ego thing and the need to be right doesn't mean we're giving up our conviction or our beliefs. I mean, certainly, it's important to stand for what you stand for. It's just the thing where we can, sort of actively listen to somebody else. That doesn't mean you're changing your opinion, right? But, to actively hear them, actually really hear them, rather than nodding and smiling, pretending like we're hearing them, right? And, and actually, I just wrote an article this weekend about this. No one likes to be spoken down to, right? So when somebody is nodding and smiling and pretending like they're listening, but they're really not, we can all feel that. We can tell. Even a small child knows when they're being patronized. They probably can't put the words to it, but even they get it. We can feel it. And to me, the hallmark of an educated person is to be an independent and critical thinker. So that was Giovanni exercising his independent thinking skills, right? And so, and then we're going to get into the limbic system soon too, because that's going on over here. Before that, though, let's just finish up with Dr. Wayne Dwyer. He says, every passionate thought that you have regarding how you want to conduct your life is evidence that you're in harmony with your own unique nature. Your fervent belief is all you need. If you're tempted to feel insecure because others disagree with you, recall what Lao Tzu counseled, that seeking favor is degrading and will lead you out of touch with your true self. I love that. So in other words, whether it's positive or negative, the fact that we're looking for it is degrading because it's valuing someone else's opinion of us more than we value our own opinion. That's good stuff. That's food for the spirit right there. And again, this also gels with what Pema Chodron said in, from last week, practicing peace in times of war, that when we're having that sticky hot lava feeling that comes up, like we're trying to hold in a sneeze, we have to say something, we have to react, we can't let so-and-so get the best of us, can't let them get a piece of us, that like thing that we have. And this also brings to mind, in Miguel Ruiz's Four Agreements, the agreement of, don't take things personally. This is also at play here because the Shenpa thing is less apt to happen if we are committed to not taking things personally. Someone else's opinion, politically, we've kind of been talking about, or fill it in, it doesn't make a difference. Someone else's opinion doesn't have to stick to us like super glue. Their opinion doesn't need to change our opinion yet. There's a lot of reacting going on over here with, how dare they have such conservative views? How dare they have such liberal views? And it's so heated because we're taking it into our hard drive like somebody shot the cat or something. I mean, it's just so too much. And this is sort of a wonderfully natural segue into kind of what I was discussing in the article that I wrote this weekend about the amygdala apocalypse, where it just seems like with the current state of things over here that, I feel like we're walking around like zombies, walking next to each other, yet completely disconnected and not knowing what other people are thinking and feeling really, because we're making a lot of assumptions. We are operating out of our limbic system, which is, of course, emotional headquarters. And when the limbic system is in charge, we are basically offline, as in not connected to our frontal lobe, which is our higher thinking process. So I think the example I used in my article was like, it's like going away, when the parents go away and leave teenagers. Not sure exactly when would do that, but let's just say they left teenagers at home for the weekend and they have a party, and anything can happen because when the limbic system, our emotional, fight, flight, freeze situation system is going, then we're not connected to the higher, the frontal lobe, but the higher thinking processes like judgment and reasoning and decision making and problem solving and impulse control. That is a big one. The amygdala, of course, and limbic system is a, far more primitive part of the brain than our, the neocortex, the prefrontal cortex we're talking about. And which is kind of where the irony is here, because we're in the age of the so-called information and technology, yet, in many ways, it doesn't seem like we've really, necessarily come that far, from our, Neanderthal ancestors, because, we're still reacting with primal rage. We, at least lately, are not all that able to solve, our problems or get our needs met with language. And, there's been a lot of reacting with violence to show dominance. And that to me, isn't all that different than, our Neanderthal ancestors. And then once again, a lot of us as adult people have really seemingly lost our ability to listen actively. And the key word here is actively. Again, we can all nod and smile and pretend, and we can even kind of, trick ourselves into thinking we're listening. Though if we were, sort of pretending like we were talking to ourselves and giving each other, giving the other person that kind of attention and engagement and compassion, where you could repeat verbatim every single word they said, or looking them in the eyes, I think, lots and lots and lots would change. And so as far as, hopefully some tips out of this, I I kind of came up, at least in this article, like trying to do like a 1 week experiment to get us back on track from, being, sort of, amygdala driven, for lack of a better way to say it, to rise to our most independently thinking selves, critically thinking selves, which also, Daniel Kahneman would say, is our system. We want to be in our system two versus our system one. So Daniel Kahneman, author of Thinking Fast and Slow, we've talked about this in past episodes, talks about our system one and sort of being stuck in that is being stuck on autopilot. It's a very fast way of thinking. It's meant to be a shortcut and save time, and which is, of course, how assumptions are made, bias happens, prejudice happens, and then the resulting discrimination happens. That is from our system one thinking, where again, shortcut. We're not taking in the facts. We're not, fact checking when somebody looks a certain way or acts a certain way or says something, like we've been saying with the political conversations. We're just knee jerking and reacting. So it's a difference of reacting versus responding, or primitive versus sophisticated. So rather than continuing to be stuck there, I thought we could all try, and I'm including myself here, we try a 1 week experiment where when we feel the shenpa, or we feel this sticky feeling, this just that where we just want to react to somebody about something, regardless if it's just, well, I don't like your haircut, versus political stuff or whatever, is the first thing is to take a grown-up time out. When you feel that surge of primal rage, to just politely, excuse ourselves, dip into the men's room, the women's room, outside, whatever. Even if it's a matter of, a minute, we are going to be less reactive and more responsive if we even take 1 minute. 5 minutes is even better, but even 60 seconds will possibly prevent a loose lips, sink ships situation. Then, of course, breathing. I can't say enough about breathing, other than, for the obvious, because remember, it's an automatic reset for the mind. It brings the mind out of whatever conversation it is, or out of what criticism it is, or out of it's in next Tuesday, your brain's in last year, wherever. It brings it immediately back, and it just centers us. So a big, deep breath. And if you can do that, 5 times or 10 times, where you duck out to the restroom, it will absolutely help whatever situation it is that you're kind of getting away from for that moment. It'll absolutely help. And the third thing I wrote there is to kill your ego. Ego bad, authentic self good. Okay? The ego just wants, like a parasite. It just wants to stay alive, sucking the good stuff out of everybody around it, and it just needs to be inflated. And we talked about it being, since it's a falsity, right? It's a false part of us. It just, nothing's long lasting with it. So we get that approval. We tell ourselves we're right. Whoever's next to us tells us we're right. 4 people tell us are right, that we're right. That's just a filler. It's just a false filler. Here's the thing: kill your ego. Just euthanize your ego. Realize that that this is not our authentic self, and that this catnip, feel good, dope fix thing that we're getting by people, that bandwagon group think thing, it's temporary. Okay? Don't fall into the trap. It makes us miserable. The next thing is tell me more. And I remember seeing that somewhere, some article I used to use, but I did not take this from there, so I don't need to give credit because I'm just using the words. Tell me more. It's kind of like that attitude that we want to go into any conversation with. That tell me more. I just want to hear more. It can be about, what's on sale at the grocery store, but if somebody's having a conversation with you, it's about being mindful. If you're going to be in the conversation, be in the conversation. Pretend that you're listening to yourself. Give yourself every ounce of your attention, or give the other person every ounce of the attention you'll give yourself. And they can feel it, just like we can feel when we've been actively listened to. Make eye contact. Be authentically engaged, even if this person's opinion is the polar opposite of yours. Challenge yourself. And, it's easy to like people who are easy to like, right? Easy to love people who are easy to love. This is not so easy when we're a liberal and they're a conservative, or they're a conservative and we're, whatever, however it goes, or change it to whatever we're talking about. They like this, you like that, you don't agree. It's much more difficult in a situation where two people completely disagree to listen. I mean, it's really hard. So it takes somebody who's committed to being an independent, critically minded thinker and to kind of rise up to this challenge. It's part of our 1 week experiment here. Another one that I like, it's an old cliche, and I have no idea where it came from, but it's keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I just slipped in the word perceived there because often we perceive people to be our enemies with their different opinions, when really what it is they have differing opinions. I mean, people go so far. If they don't agree with them, they defriend them on social media and all this, like middle school behaviors. It's so ridiculous. Keep your friends close and your perceived enemies closer. So even if you strongly disagree or even despise the other side or that person, make this effort to know what makes them tick. Because here's the thing: think about it, if you're actually in a real battle, you're going to lose that. Like on the ground, you're going to lose the battle if you don't understand your opponent. I mean, that's just true. Bring it back to something a little less hostile. Well, maybe not football, and I happen to love football. I mean, in sports that are team sports, the coaches want you to know what makes the other team tick. They want you to hopefully try to figure out what their plays are. So if you really want to quote unquote win the game, meaning just to stay on top of the game, knowing what you're talking about, being independently and critically thinking, you do want to know what the other person's side is. Really, really know why they think what they think. Isn't going to change you unless you allow it. Next, we have don't let karma bite you in the ass. Okay, I love this one because the amygdala, of course, is we talked about derailing the higher thought processes. One function of which is impulse control. So when we react, that's obviously we're not exercising great impulse control. So the don't let the karma bite you in the ass thing is about reminding yourself that when we react versus respond, it doesn't typically go well, right? We want to jump out of system one, reactive, reflexive, knee-jerk mode, into system two, which fact checks. It's a more gradual, slower system, which gathers the facts first, kind of just thinks, kind of stews for a little bit, and then responds. Responding is way better than reacting the high majority of the time, with like the rare exception of like you're trying to, you know, jump in front of a car to rescue a toddler or something. That would be the exception. The rest of the time, slowing that thinking down, gathering facts, actively listening is the way to go. So don't let your karma bite you in the ass, because payback is a bitch. We look what happens when we are impulsive with our words or our actions. Doesn't go well. And then lastly, we have take the high road. Remind yourself that it's more important to be kind than right. I have in parentheses most of the time, because there's those rarities. But for the most part, if you can suck it up and take the high road, that also reduces the power of the ego significantly. We can know we're right and not have to say it, and we just gained authentic strength, which will far outlast ego strength. And then, by the way, this is my Psychology Today article. I think I'm supposed to give them credit too, so I just did. And I wrote at the bottom, the time has come to get back online with the rational brain, the part of us that says, hey, whoa, wait, hit the brakes, hit the pause button, right? It's time we got back online with that, rational part of ourselves, so we can stop thinking with our feelings and move forward as a civilized society. Okay, so hopefully you followed me on that one, and we'll just do a little recap here. So, seeking out external approval doesn't go well either way, right? Because that's giving power to the external environment rather than, sort of residing on the inside and valuing our own opinion. Because that empowers us on the inside. We want our authentic power to be what's kind of driving us. Absolutely. And then how this kind of broadly sort of leaks out to those around us, right? Because when we're, sort of seeking that external approval and those around us are feeding our own, the egos need to be right, this leads to a group think thing, and that generally doesn't go anywhere good either. So the main theme here is that independent thinking brings authentic freedom. It brings freedom to the individual and freedom to us as a civilized society. And this is a wonderful place to kind of have closure. So I'm going to say thank you for listening here in the States and across the world. Thank you. Big thank yous for listening. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off from Northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.